Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a first-hand account that perfectly illustrates the anatomy of a haunting. We're going to break down this incredible source narrative step by step to understand exactly how a completely mundane evening transforms into pure psychological terror, and the tragic history that actually fuels it.
So, have you ever felt completely alone in a familiar place? You know that feeling, that instinctual urge to just look over your shoulder when a normally crowded, safe location suddenly goes completely silent. It's a universal human experience for sure, but in the account we're analyzing today, that common feeling of unease escalates into a documented nightmare that the protagonist will literally never forget. Let's explore how this happens.
Section 1. Late night at the library.
The foundation of this terror is how a completely normal evening of cramming for final exams spiraled totally out of control. The environment starts off as a safe haven, right? It's a quiet place near the student's home. At 6 p.m., the student arrives to study, which is totally normal. 8 p.m. is their usual departure time, and at that point, they're still surrounded by other students. But because the school kept the library open until midnight for exams, they simply lose track of time. By 10 p.m., we hit absolute silence. The safety in numbers completely vanished while they were absorbed in their work, allowing this deep, suffocating sense of isolation to just creep up on them organically.
Now we hit the catalyst. The student had just 10 to 15 minutes of work left to finish. They were completely lost in their studies when that dead, 10 p.m. library silence is abruptly broken by a distinct, really unsettling sound. I heard someone limping. It's that abrupt intrusion of an unnatural, rhythmic noise into a silent, isolated space that immediately triggers the primal human fight-or-flight response. That feeling of safety is instantly shattered.
The situation rapidly builds into pure panic. The student frantically packs up their books and just sprints out of the library, running down the school's massive, empty corridor toward the exit. But just before they reach safety, they catch a brief, incredibly uncomfortable glimpse of a mysterious woman standing all the way at the far end of the hall. The unease is so thick the student actually calls out, "Who's there?" And the moment they speak, she vanishes. The immediate physical threat seems to disappear, but the psychological tension is now dialed up to a 10. They're no longer just alone, they are being watched.
Section 2. The Eerie Walk Home.
Okay, having escaped out the front door, you'd logically think the worst was over. The student even sighs a breath of relief. But the transition to the outdoors only brings more vulnerability. On a normal night, the street is very busy, lived in, and safe with people walking around. But on that particular night, the street is strangely and completely empty. The protagonist is walking into an unnatural, silent void that directly contradicts their established reality. The source notes how incredibly odd this is, heavily amplifying the dread because the world outside is behaving just as wrong as the empty library.
Driven by panic and exhaustion, the student keeps their eyes glued to the pavement, and suddenly they see a shadow stretching out to them on the ground. Imagine that deeply unsettling moment. You know you are entirely alone. You know there's no one walking behind you. Yet an impossible shadow is reaching toward you in the dark. It's a masterful moment of suspense in this account, forcing the horrifying realization that the isolation they feared has actually been breached by something unseen.
When they finally lift their head, they're forced to confront the impossible. A figure limping ahead of them on the previously empty street. The source describes this entity in jarring, grotesque detail. She's wearing tattered, dirty clothes. Her hair is a wild mess, and her hands and feet look horribly twisted and deformed. And she is walking impossibly slowly. The student catches up to her in no time. This isn't just a creeping dread anymore. It's an undeniable, physical horror placed directly in their path, blocking their way home.
Section 3. Face to Face with Fear.
We are now at the climax of the narrative, where evasion is no longer an option. What do you do when your gut screams, "Don't go any closer"? The source explicitly states the students' instincts were telling them over and over to stay away, but they are completely frozen in their tracks. You have to imagine catching up to this terrifying figure, paralyzed by sheer shock, lacking the courage to overtake her. And then, the ultimate terror. The figure asks an incomprehensibly strange question that leaves the student's brain completely numb, unable to process what is actually happening.
Operating purely on survival instinct, with a completely numb brain, the student takes a desperate action. Not knowing how to answer this terrifying entity, they simply point far, far away, just to make her leave. It's a primal act of misdirection, born out of sheer panic. And incredibly, it works. It tricks the woman into limping away toward the pointed spot, buying the student a precious, fleeting window to run for a car, a person, anyone who could possibly help them.
But the terror isn't over.
As the student sprints away, terrified she might reappear, the night is suddenly shattered. From the distance, they hear the woman screaming, "She is here!" It is a blood-curdling sound, a massive sensory overload of absolute terror. Hearing that scream confirms their absolute worst fears, causing the student's overloaded mind to shut down entirely, and they pass out right there on the street.
Section 4. The Ghost of Agatha. After being found unconscious on the ground by a neighbor and safely brought home, the student finally learns the context of what they experienced. This horrifying encounter is actually tied directly to the school itself. To truly understand what happened that night, we have to strip away the monster element of the story. The narrative traces the local history back to the year 1998, a time when a terrible, life-altering event occurred in the community.
In that year, a 32-year-old local woman named Agatha had her life irrevocably shattered. The source pivots here from a story of pure horror to one of profound human grief, placing Agatha firmly at the center of the nightmare. She was a mother, and the trauma she experienced became permanently etched into the neighborhood's history.
The tragedy centers entirely around her 10-year-old daughter. She was a student at Eden Hill School, the very same school where our protagonist was studying late at night. Tragically, while playing with her friends, this 10-year-old girl had a fatal accident. The sudden, devastating loss was something Agatha simply couldn't bear, breaking her spirit entirely and leading to a grief that transcended her own life.
This tragic history reveals the true identity of the entity from that night, Agatha's ghost. The source defines her as a spirit forever roaming Eden Hill School and its surroundings, wandering in hopes of being reunited with her lost child. This fundamentally changes how we view the entire account. The twisted, limping entity on the street wasn't a mindless monster. It was a grieving mother, eternally searching the dark, quiet streets for the child she lost all those years ago. The horror gives way to a profound, lingering sadness.
So ask yourself, next time you are walking alone in the quiet dark, who might be searching for you? This account leaves us with the unsettling realization that some tragedies never truly rest, echoing endlessly through the places we think are safe. It challenges us to think about the hidden history behind every empty street and familiar building. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always stay curious about the stories hiding just out of sight.